Alright, so in this channel you will start with you knowing how to create Python code from the beginning, from scratch to a professional level. Let's get started. I'm going to try to open a PowerShell command prompt, and in the command prompt I want to navigate to the document, and in the document I want to create a folder for us. We'll be using this folder to store our project, so I'll call this folder, I want to make a folder, I'll call this folder project 1. Now this project will be created. I want to move into this project 1, and I'll be opening VS Code on that project 1. Alright, so if you want to know how to use command prompts like a pro, please go to our previous videos. We have our videos that explain from the basics, that takes you from the basic to a professional power user, so you can interact with your system using your PowerShell or your command prompts. So I'll go ahead and create a file. I'm going to call this class 1. Since this is our first class, I'll call this class 1. Now, just before you start writing your code, there's the basic things you need to understand about Python. Now, Python is a programming language. Python is an higher level programming language. It's different from C or C#. So for our Python, we're going to be writing this code in a way that we are interacting with memory. So here we are assuming that each line of our code will be taken by the memory and then it will be executed. So before you start writing your code, you need to understand this logic, that whenever you write a code, each line of your code will go through the memory, and the memory will be executing them one after the other. So if you are passing your code to the memory, you need to know how to pass that code to the memory. Now, if you understand this particular logic, then the basics or the foundation of Python will be very, very easy for you to start building on. Now, let's assume that we are thinking of how does Python, or how does a programming language works. Now, each line of programming language, each line of our programming language work by storing a set of data or value in a temporary memory, which is your processor, and then it is used to combine with other storage, memory storage, and then we use them to do our calculation. So this particular file will be saved in your hard drive, and then when you execute the code, the code on this file, the entirety of this code will be taken from your hard drive, then it will be stored inside your RAM. Now, when this entire code is stored on your RAM, your processor will now go through your RAM and start picking each line of this code one after the other, then it will be executing them. So if you have this file stored there on your system, it's not going to execute until you have run it. Now, when you run the file will move from your hard drive down to your RAM, and then your CPU or your processor will now start reading those files one after the other. So you see your file is stored in your hard drive, and then it's also stored, the code is now stored, placed temporarily on your RAM. Then each line of code is now executed one after the other. So when we are writing our code, we are going to be writing this code as if we are telling the processor what to do with each line of our code. For example, if I want my processor to store a value, I can tell my processor to store a value Emmanuel, and then give that particular value a name in its memory called name. So when my processor sees this, it's going to pick this one here as the name of the storage space is going to be using. Then it will be taking this one here as the item that it will be stored inside this memory space. So this here, what I'm doing here, I'm telling my processor how to handle name. I'm telling it to handle a name, which is Emmanuel in this case. It should handle it by storing it inside this particular name. Now in programming language, we call this particular area variables, and then we call this one values. So this is more like a memory name of this item that is stored. So for my processor to be able to identify this item, it will use this to identify it. Now I can also tell my processor to store 34 inside age. Store 34 inside age. That's what I'm trying to say. Now in this case here, this is my variable and this is my value. Now it is very important you understand this, as this is the foundation of every programming language. We store an item, which is a variable, which is a value, inside a memory space called a variable. Now when you go through this name here, if you search for this name here in your memory, you are not going to see this exact text. You are going to be seeing a group of binary numbers. So this makes sense. Now in Python, you have to make sure that you follow a pattern of creating variables. There are various rules you should follow when you are creating a variables. For example, when you are creating a variable, you shouldn't start a variable name with a symbol or a number. Well, let me put it here. I'm gonna say hashtag do not start a variable name with a number. Now because I have a hashtag here, this particular text that is here will not be read by Python. So when we execute our code, Python will not read to this code because it starts with $sign. We are going to talk more on it later on. It's more like a way of commenting a adding a comment to our code, so it will explain to people better what code you have here. So in this case, I'm trying to explain that one of the rules of creating a variable is that you do not start a variable name with number. So I cannot say name 1 or say one name, something like this. So I'm trying to say the first name and then I say one name, and then I'm calling this John. Now this is wrong. So whenever you are creating a variable, do not start your variable name with number. This will give you an error. So I'll add this a comment. So that is wrong. Then number 2, our $sign. Do not start a variable name with symbol. It's very important. Please do not start a variable name with symbol. Like I'm saying age, and then I'm trying to say age equals to 21. This is wrong. Or I say at weight equals to 33. This is wrong. Or I'm saying something like this: years equals to 3 years. This is also wrong. So please do not start a variable name with numbers or symbols. Then another thing you should not do when you are preparing your variable, when you are creating a variable, do not start a variable name with capital letter or uppercase, whichever. So in Python, you are not supposed to start a variable name this way. This is wrong, though this will not give you an error. We're going to call this Williams. Though this will not give you an error, but this is wrong. Do not start a variable name with uppercase. Yes. And then another rules is that do not start a variable name or do not separate variable name with space. So I want to say first name, and then I'm saying first name equals to Kings. Now do not do this. Keeping a space between two variables is wrong, so do not do that. So do not start it with space or symbol. No, okay, and only use underscore for variable name separation. So right now I want to separate this first name, and then I should not separate them. It's not actually okay to separate my variable name with this. So if I want to do something like that, I would rather say first name underscore equals to name. This is okay, this is acceptable, but this first one up here is not acceptable. So another thing you should not do when you are preparing your variable name is that you don't want your variable name to be entirely uppercase. So do not make your variable name to be uppercase. For example, I don't want to say something like this, first name is equals to Mark. This is wrong. This in Python is seen as a constant, so you do not want to make that a variable. So this will not give you an error, but in Python we call this constant. Here you see it here, it's called constant. So constants are more like variable that doesn't change, that you know you would not change. Yes, so don't do this, as this would affect your program. And then there are cases where we see people use something like this. Do not use camel case. Do not use camel case for your variable. Now there is some kind of when it comes to camel case here, people usually have a conflicting thought about it, but for Python standard it is always preferable you do not use camel case. So the general protocol for variables in Python is snake case, which is this here. So do not use camel case. And when I say camel case, what do I mean by that? So I can say first name, something like this, equals to Mark. Yeah, so you see here, this start with small letter, then this starts with now have capital letter here. So this will work, but this is not advisable when you are working with other developers. So if you know you're going to be working with other people during your development, you're going to be collaborating with other people when building an application, it will be preferable you stick to snake case. Yeah. Alright, so that is what we have here. So the question now is, what is now the right case to use? Now the correct case you want to use when you are creating your variable is to make sure that your variable are in lowercase. For example, if I want to say first name, I can say first underscore name. This is correct. So sorry, I'll say best way to name a variable is by saying first name equals to John. This is okay, and this will work fine. So you can also say surname underscore surname. Yeah, we are combining two values together, and this is okay. So you could use this surname equals to James. So you could use this, and you could use this. This is a good way of naming a variable. Now you see they are all in small letters, and these are also in small letters. And when it comes to separating those variables, we use our underscore to separate variables. This is a good way of writing your variables. We'll be looking at how you can create values and the different kind of values you can have. So I'm going to create an extra file for us here, which is what we'll be using for value. I'm going to call this class2.py. Now in this area, we'll be looking at how you can create different kind of values and how you can apply them on variables. Now remember, I said variables are your part of memory that holds your value, and your values are actually your data. So do not forget that values are actually data you insert into your code. Now generally, when you are writing program, you're going to be inserting different kind of values into your program, and then you'll be getting response. That is what programming basically is all about. We input, then our computer process data, then we actually it will actually give us an output. It's more like carrying out a calculation. So we can give it two values of numbers, and then our computer will do a processing on it. It could be an addition, then it will give us the result as the answer. So we can have various kind of variables. So I'll say here there are different type of variables in Python. So there are different kind of variables in Python. The first kind of variables we have in Python, which we'll look at, is the string. Now the string is very popular. And what are string variables? So string variables, or values rather, the string values are values they are alphabetic. So I'll call them alphabetic or so they could be alphabetic, and they could also be any type of value that is quoted. So any value that is quoted, we refer to them as a string value. So what I mean by quoted value is, if I have this here, let's say I have this called communication. So because communication is quoted, it is referred to as a string value. Then if I have this here, this is also a string value. Then I can also have something like this. So because this is empty, that empty space is seen as a string value. So so if you have any alphabetic value or any type of value that is quoted, you can refer to them as a string value. Sorry, this is wrong. I'm gonna call this. I didn't take note of that. Okay, so let's say example of a string value. So I can have name, this is example Williams, since it's quoted is a string value. I can have an email, which I'm gonna say Haxora at gmail.com as example of a string value. I can have password, which is password 123. That is another string value. I can have numbers. This is a string value. So as long as they are quoted, any value that you have them quoted, they are a good example of a string value. Now, what kind of values we have is the integer value. Integer values. So an integer value is any value, any numeric value so any numeric value without decimal is a string value, is an integer value. So if we have any numeric value that is not decimal, that particular value is referred to as an integer value. Now those values are actually rare. For example, if I have age is a good example of a string of an integer value. So we can say somebody is 2 years, but when you say, it would be unreasonable for you to say somebody is 2.5 years, which is, or 1.5 years, which is more like 1.5. So that's you are trying to say that the person is 1.5. Now when you insert something like that in your integer value, it is approximated into 2 years. So instead of saying the person is 2.5 years, you can say the person is 18 months. This make more sense than saying 2.5 years. Okay, So when you also look at population, and then we have about 200 people. This is a good example of an integer value. So if I am talking about the population of people, it is okay for you to use integer in this case here. Then there are also other numbers you want to insert. You can just say I want to insert a value. For example, I can just say I want a random number, which I can call 65. So this is just a random number I pick from my head, and they could also be an integer value. Okay, so we also have a float value in Python, or values. These are numeric value with decimal. So if I have a numeric value with decimal, I'm going to refer to that value as an integer value. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if I have a So if I want to have a value, for example, I'm looking at somebody's height. You can see is 5.3. Then I can talk about weight. I can talk about rate. The rate is 4.2. I can talk about the distance. Yeah, then currency also is a good example of an integer, a float rather. So you see I have a float which contain all these values, and they could also be used for your decimal values or decimal numbers. So when you have a decimal number in Python, we see them as a float. So apart from floats, we also have boolean value. So boolean value, these are values that these are values that are either true or false. So they come into form, they are either true or false. Values like that are seen as an integer value. For example, I can say is active. So if it's active, I can say true. Otherwise, I can say false. I can say is available. If it's available, I'm gonna say true is available. Otherwise, I'll say false is not available. Yes. So these are various values you could have in Python. Now, so far, all these values we've actually inserted are values that can take in just a single. Sorry, the variables we have here takes in just single values here. single values here. You see down here they are taken in just single values. Now sometimes we might want to input multiple values into a single variables. Yeah, so sometimes we might want to do something like that. In that case, we'll be looking at list. So the first kind of value, the first set of values that can take in multiple item is the list. So if I want to store multiple item inside a single value, inside a single variable, I can use list or something. Now let's take, for example, I have fruit, and inside my fruit I want to store mango, I want to store orange, I want to store apple, I want to store watermelon. Now over here you will see I can now store different kind of values inside this single variable. So I have all these values stored inside this variable. Now the question is, what are lists? Now lists are a variable that contain list of values, and each value can be identified by their index. So for me to identify each of these values here, I'm going to be using the index. We identify them by their index. So the question is, what is the index of this? The index of this is 0, the index of this is 1, the index of this is 2, and the index of this is 3. So how do I fetch that? So I can say my fruit index 0. Now when I do something like this, it is very easy for me to fetch. Sorry, this should be in small letter. It will be very easy for me to fetch this value here. So if I change this to 1, it will fetch this. If I change this to 2, it will fetch this. So let's try that and see. I'm going to try something here. I'll print out y here. I want to print y here, and let me save this file here now. So I'll run this my code here. My system is taking time to execute the code, but it's okay. Okay, now you see I've been able to fetch mango over here. So if I change this to 1 and then I re-execute this, this will change to orange. If I change this to 2 and I execute this, this will change to apple. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to tell you that each of these item in this list can be identified by their index. So when you are handling a list, you see this as a container that can hold multiple values. So this is a kind of container. When a container have this brackets here, we call that container a list container. Yes. Now this might be something you'll be wondering, why do I use y equals to this? Yeah, so what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get the item here, and then I want to, this will now become a value that I'm fetching out from this place here, and then I want to store it inside a variable in this case here. So the variable now is y, and then this will now automatically become a value. So when this fetch out my data, this will fetch out whatever value is inside there, and then it will be stored here. Then this is a function that print out whatever value that is stored inside this variable. Okay, so let's move to the next one here. Now this is a very good container you can use to store different items. So our list here is only containing only strings. So you see this is a string because they are quoted and they are separated with comma. You could also store other things like student information. So I'm going to call this and the student's name can be whatever name I'm giving to it. I'll call this Williams, and the student's age can be 23, and the height of that student could be 1.3, and then the gender could be male, let's say male, and it's possible for that student to be active. So if the student is active, I can say true. So you see in this case here, I have almost all the items. So I have Williams here. This is a string, this is an integer, this is a float, and this is a boolean value. So your string can contain all its items to be a particular value or separate value. So you can have an entire list that contain an integer, you can have an entire list that contain floats, you can have an entire list that contain your boolean value, and then it could be a mixture. It doesn't matter, it's still going to create your item for you. So this is very important for you to understand. Now you could also have your list to contain other set of lists. Let's take for example, I still have my student this time record, my student's record. So my student's record could contain list of each different student. So I can have Williams, and I can have Williams' age to be 23, and then I can have Williams to be male. Okay, then I can also have somebody else here, which in this case is let's say Emmanuel. Oh yeah, 32, and this can be a female. Okay, then I can also have another person here, which could be John this time. John can be 21, and John can be a male. So in this case, you see I only have lists inside my items, and they can also have different value, and then even the list can also have strings separately, which I can say Mary, and then it can also have true. Yes, but they still have the same concept. This is going to remain my first index, which is index 0. This will remain my second index, and this will remain my third index. So if I come here and find my index, let's say I say student student record, which is 2 in this case here, and I print out my y here. I'm going to execute this code. You see it's going to pick up the second item here. Oh yeah, since I'm using 2, so this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. Okay, so we're going to still see how you can break this, but this will be when we get to list manipulation. So stay with us in this class, and we're going to be looking at that in depth. Okay, so apart from list, another set of container that we have is the tuple. So we have the tuple. So tuples are values. They're actually variables that contain items that are immutable. Once they have been created. So our tuple, there are a list of values that you cannot change, you can't alter them once they have been created. Now, how do we write our tuple? So I can write our tuple. I can say my IP address is going to be this. I have 192. This makes sense. 192.168.1.0.9. Then I can also have my port number to be port 40. So this can be my IP address and my port number. Now, one thing you should notice is that this particular container have parentheses. So you see here, these have parentheses, and you can identify a tuple by the parentheses you have there. Okay, now let's move further on to the next our next value. So the next value that we have is the next set of values we have is to apart from tuple is the dictionary. So we have dictionary. They are variables that contain key and value pairs. There are values that have keys and their value alongside with it. So what this kind of data contain? It contain any values that we have that has its key alongside with it. Let's take, for example, I have our students database. We have our student database. Here I can say the name of my student is Mary, and then the age of our student is 23, 24. Then we can also say our gender, student gender can be female. And so on. Then we can also say our student course, that makes sense, is Python. Now you see this container has this curly braces here. So the curly braces is what you use to identify your container. So you can use this to identify each of your items, and then it will help you with your to hold your data. Now this is the key of your dictionary item, and this is the value. Now if you remember in your list, we have index. We use index to identify each value. In dictionary, we use the key to identify the value. So if I want to fetch out the value here, I'm going to first of all look for the key of that value. Let's take, for example, I have y here. I can say y here equals to student's record. And then I want to find the name of the student. Print my y here. Then I can run this. In this case, my student's name is Mary. Alright, so this will help us a lot to identify our items. Now lastly, another kind of values that takes in, another kind of variables that take in multiple values is the set. So we have the set. Now sets are variables that contain unique values. They contain unique values. Now what do I mean? Now if you decide that you want to store some values that you know that they should not be duplicated, you can use your set. For example, if I want to have my my Champions League team, I'm going to say Chelsea. Okay, then I have Man City, Man U, Liverpool, and other team here. So you see this, that's my AI trying to complete my code for me. So you see here now that I have my different set of club here. Now if I print out this item here, just as I print this item out here, let's print out my Champions League. This will print out all my clubs that are available in the Champions League. Now assuming I have Chelsea in two places here, let's say I have Chelsea again. Now Chelsea is now appearing too, so I have Chelsea here, I have Chelsea here. Now remember I said that your set does not have the values inside this place should be unique, so you cannot have the same values inside. So if I run this here, Python will remove the first Chelsea out, and then it will rearrange my item and only have a unique item inside my container. So these are different ways you can actually identify your text, and these are the different kind of values you have in your Python code. Please subscribe to our channel, and you can like and share with your friends. Thank you very much.